Hey, good people. Grits or cream of wheat? Who the hell is racist? Does anyone ever ask if they touch your hair?
Black Like Me.
You're listening to Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G., a podcast that invites you to experience the world through the perspective of one black man, one conversation, one story, or even one rant at a time. Here's Dr. G.
Black Like Me.
Hey, everybody. I want to welcome you to another exciting episode of Black Like Me with Dr. Alex G. We have a really important yet heavy topic to discuss today, and it's the treatment of kids of color, particularly African-American students in our school district. We actually have wrestled with the reality that a report funded by the Annie E. Casey Foundation has studied just life of blacks and whites in Madison, more specifically in Dane County, and we have found that economically, educationally, there is the broadest gap, the greatest disparity between blacks and whites of any place else in the country, particularly between the academics of blacks and whites in, say, 3rd grade and 8th grade. And for several years, we've been wrestling to figure out what's been the cause of these issues. One of the things that I want to take a look at today is what happens when well-intentioned white residents, white parents, see something or witness something that's happening in a school, particularly in the case we're going to talk about very generally involving a black student. What happens when their eyes are opened to the reality of these things that are happening? What role do they take? Is it that we are progressive in the sense that we want equality for everyone, but we're so shocked when we see disparity and somewhat immobilized and not sure what steps to take, what to say, how much to push when they are witnessing these things that typically only African Americans have seen and voiced? And so what happens when our white friends, our white colleagues, our white allies step into this space? What's the right step? What's too much? What's too little? Because I think sometimes people find themselves in murky waters and aren't sure what steps to take. And we might have called that apathy or a lack of care. And it might really be just a matter of shock that this really happens at this level, that it's so blatant. And what's their role and how much do they push? And is there any pushback? And so I think you're going to enjoy this episode because I think it will help to give us fodder for thought and give us some extra tools for our arsenal and what we might do when we see disparities taking place. So Eli is going to be weighing in on this. He's my engineer and the sound person who you hear him in the background a lot during the show. He actually was one of the parents who experienced some of this and wanted to be of support to the family. Jeremy is also here, who works as our editor and one of our engineers as well. He's a parent of a child in that same school. And we also have Kate, who is here, and I really appreciate her presence because she's also a parent of a child in that school. And they've had some discussions with the parent and around this situation. And for obvious reasons, we are not going to divulge the actual school, the actual names, the actual incidents, because we want to be fair and appropriate. But we want to talk about the response to it. And so, Kate, before I ask Eli just to kind of bring us up to date on what has happened, could you just take a minute and just tell us who you are? First of all, I just want to say I'm so glad that you're here. But could you just take a moment, just tell us just a little bit about yourself and where you grew up?
Sure. I'm happy to be here. My name's Kate Kaio. I am from Madison, so I moved here in 2nd grade.
Wow.
You did.
Yeah, that's my story too.
We moved here from Georgia, and what my parents always told me is I had to do speech and language classes to get rid of my Southern accent.
Oh, really?
So I grew up here and then left Madison to go to college and moved back here about 7 years ago. My husband and I are both teachers in the district.
Oh, all right.
And then our 3 kids go to schools in the district.
Sure. Okay, so you have a perspective as a person who is a product of the school district. You worked in it as a teacher, and then you're also experiencing as a parent. So, man, that qualifies you on so many levels to give just real honest feedback and observation. And so thank you so much. I appreciate that. So, Eli, why don't you bring us up to speed a little bit, and then I'd just love to have a dialogue with the three of you about things you've observed, and then I've got a couple of questions for you. So, Eli, can you just update us on the subject?
Without giving a lot of details, there was a fairly young black boy that had hands put on him by staff at an elementary school. And I think the main part of this is why so many parents were alerted to it is the way that it was handled by the school. There was a public communication that went out to parents at that school, which treated it more as a personnel issue that was being handled internally. And then as some more story came out directly from the parent of the child, there was kind of a different story being told from their perspective that was a little more serious, and how the family was treated, how the child was treated, that wasn't the public communication. So I think that's when a lot of parents became concerned when they started to hear that whole story, and then tried to come alongside the family to give them support and concern over their perspective on things, and trying to reconcile, what the school was saying and what the family was saying happened in that incident.
All right, thank you. That's a good summary. Am I correct in assuming that the administrator, the teacher that put their hands on the student was white?
Yes, and in fact, all the staff are currently white at the school.
Okay, all the staff. And when parents started hearing about the incident from the parent of the child, was that done through social media? I'm just curious about how parents heard about it. So they found out about it through social media.
Actually, the mother was on another radio show and talked about it. And talked about that story, and that sort of got passed around through email and social media. And so there's kind of a growing thread of parents talking over email and then in person with the family after that. That sort of came out. But I think if that didn't happen, a lot of this information wouldn't even be known to the broader community. So,
well, I mean, just in general, if a person is dismissed, a person who's part of the teaching staff is dismissed because of some altercation or alleged altercation with a child, I think parents should just know in general, because if someone's been a part of a school for years and they're automatically gone, you assume the worst. Was a sexual crime perpetrated against a child? What's going on? So there's a dropping of the balls.
And in this case, the teacher was not removed.
Oh, in this case, the teacher was not.
Was not removed.
The teacher is still there. Oh, snap. Okay, I got you. So then the parent begins to talk. So, Kate, Jeremy, is this were you all coming, or do you hear from other parents, or so how did you get drawn into the discussion? Because I'm assuming you all have children the same age as that child.
The way it happened is there was there's an email group of folks that are interested in the LCO, which is the parent-teacher organization, essentially. Sure. And I've never gone to a meeting, but I got on the email list when my son got started. And there's sometimes discussion on there just about, hey, we're doing this thing. And sometimes there's a little bit of hey, what's going on over here? But another mom whose child goes to school had posted a link to
the radio
program and said, hey, have any of you guys heard about this? Do you have thoughts about it? And I listened to the radio show, and I was fairly surprised at what I'd heard. The thing that stood out to me...
Surprised because it was different from what you
I had not heard about it. I mean, there was... I think there had been a brief email communication that something happened somewhere. And I, those come out and I didn't have personal contact with the family. I didn't know. Listen to the radio show. The thing that stood out on the radio show was that after the incident happened, the mother found out about it from her child when she picked him up at the end of the day. And there was just something about that which really hasn't left me since that moment, that something was wrong with that. That just smelled terribly fishy to me. Because I remember when my son was in pre-K and someone accidentally cut his sleeve in art class. They were in art class today, his sleeve was accidentally cut by another, and people told me, they had a really strong attention to all these details of his physical person. And to hear the story and to hear that the mom finds out about it from his kid, it just seemed real bad.
Did the email say that it was an African-American parent and child, or did you find that out once you listened to the interview?
Found that out after listening to the interview.
Okay.
And the reason, and at some point in there, on this email list, I said, hey, this sounds kind of funky, because the mom had been prompted by this other mom. Can we reach out to this mom and see, if we can help her out, or, it seems like if we're a parent-teacher organization, we can do that. Either it was before that or slightly after that, there was another email sent out, a date in December, which pretty much said that people are out there talking about something that happened at the school, and it's not true. It didn't happen. There was no intentional harm.
That came from the school. It came
from the principal.
From the principal.
And certainly what I had thought that and it also said that like there was a district investigation that was conducted, and the conclusion of it was that no intentional harm was done. And it certainly seemed to me like the email was saying that nothing happened and that the parent was lying. And that was an impression that we have since communicated to the principal, and that like this showed up in my own son's classroom. I mean, there are plenty of people around the school who read that email, including staff, and think that the implication of that email was that the parent and child was lying. I don't think that's an unreasonable thing to assume based on that. And it was because of that email and that radio show that, I don't know, like an interested group of parents apparently sort of came out of the woodwork who were on this email list and sort of coalesced around initially like, hey, like it looks like something is amiss here. Can we, and the mom.
So is the mom on that list?
She got on the list pretty quickly.
She got on the list pretty quickly.
There was some early talk of doing some restorative justice work
for this thing that didn't happen.
Yep, and then I think one thing that became important to me was bringing some African American perspective, somebody from the African American community, to come alongside the mother, the family, to offer that, because I think it was a lot to navigate for that family. Mm-hmm. And I'm not claiming to be any expert in what that experience is like, but I knew somebody else needed to help step in with them to deal with that. And it soon became aware that, yes, things were not in a place where there was enough answers, enough understanding, communication between the school trust to begin that sort of restorative process yet.
Gotcha. So, Kate, how are you brought into this? First of all, I just want to say, I think it's important that you all responded to say, how do we give support to this mom? Because I think it's so easy in society to just look the other way. Well, did the child do something? Teachers and principals don't lie about this kind of thing. I really appreciate the sensitivity to the subject matter to really press and want to connect with the parent. So, Kate, were you somehow involved with connecting with the parent, or could you give a little bit of just your response to the situation and the parent's response to the group's interest?
Sure. So yes, similar to Jeremy, I got an email from a friend saying, hey, I think you're going to want to listen to this podcast. So I did, and then I just was really surprised. And like, I think there are two different issues, like what Jeremy said. There's what happened in the school with the original teacher, but then it was the response from the school that really struck me as a real problem. And I'm a teacher, and I was really surprised that that's how they were responding to this trauma that happened to this child. Sure. And then later to get an email that basically just said, we're not listening to the kid here. We did an investigation, and we are supporting what the teacher is saying, and nothing happened. And I just thought, as a parent of having my 3 kids at that school, like, oh, you're not listening to the kids? Oh, well, that's interesting. And so it made me reach out to the mom, and I didn't know her, but I just sent her an email and just said, hey, I heard about what happened. I have 3 kids at that school, and I'm really sorry that you're going through this. And then later, my husband has been trained by the district to do restorative justice circles, and he's a teacher, and so he's done restorative justice circles at his school, and those have really helped the culture at his school. Helps people feel heard, helps. There's always going to be problems, and so there need to be strategies to talk about those problems. And so he sent out in this email that Jeremy's talking about to the PTO email list, and just said, hey, is anybody interested in helping to get a restorative justice circle started? And I think he had emailed the parent to say, is this something you'd be interested in? She said yes. And so we ended up having people over at our house. It was a small group of people, but we have a small house, so we didn't quite have enough chairs for everybody. But everybody was accommodating and made it work. And we all just sat in a circle and started to introduce ourselves and introduce what our hope was to get this restorative justice circle going. And we were told, well, wait, the mom has decided not to do a restorative justice circle. And so it was a switch, which was interesting for us to be like, oh, okay, so what's going on? And then the mom started to tell more of her story, and she just said, because this was weeks after the incident. And she said, I still haven't gotten any, let alone an apology, but no acknowledgement that this happened.
Or support for the child.
Nothing. And even worse, she'd been told not to say anything to anybody.
Really? By the district?
Which
or the
might
school?
have been miscommunication, but that was 100% her interpretation of what she'd been told.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's when we said, okay, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense that you're not interested in restorative justice circle. There has to be something there for you to trust.
Right. If injustice has not been acknowledged, how are you building a circle that's trying to restore justice and there's not been any acknowledgement of a breach of justice?
Right. And so then we had to back up and say, okay, well, what do you need? Mm-hmm. What would help you in this situation? And she just was saying that she needed information. She wanted to know what had happened. She hadn't been given an incident report. There had been a police investigation. She hadn't been given that report yet. And so we said, okay, let's see if we can get that information for you.
And was the group able to get that information?
Good question.
Well, so it came in stages. So we ended up as a group having a meeting in late January in which we were provided with, and the mother was provided with the incident report. The incident report was not what any of us expected.
This is about a month later? 3 weeks?
Yeah, a month and a half
6
later.
weeks.
A month and a half, yeah.
And the report just said like that. I mean, I don't remember the exact words, but it was that like an incident happened. There was no intentional harm. Period. It was like 3 sentences on a single sheet of paper.
So there was an acknowledgement of an incident, but it was the intention behind the incident that was sort of nullified.
I mean, at least that's the way it was. I mean, I didn't. It was on the table across. I didn't read, but it was the present.
I mean, no one said the kid was lying or he has a habit of lying. They just if there was no malintent. In some ways, that's inadvertently acknowledging some incident, but it was no malice intended.
And right, and verbally, the principal, the school superintendent, a few others were there. It was acknowledged that the teacher had made a mistake, but we, as none of us, including the mother, was entitled to know
what the mistake was.
In some sense, or like what disciplinary action was being taken on the teacher. We were told that we're not able to know what that is.
I'm getting mad.
It seems more and more clear. They finally admitted this was only handled as a personnel issue because they admitted some fault, but they did not approach it as physical restraint on the child, which should require its own sort of process of investigation. And I think by handling it that way, it stays internal and they can claim this confidentiality policy, which releases no information to us in the public or in this case to the parents also. And
they hide behind this because I know I was talking with the acting superintendent this week about an incident at another school where a white student is calling black staff and black kids the N-word and has done this repeatedly. Mm-hmm. And there's six cases, 6 incidents where that's happened. And so when we're asking questions, the response was, well, because this is an HR matter with the teachers, we can't say anything. And because of other reasons, we can't explain what actions have been taken with the student. After the second time of being told that, I just said to the superintendent, would you please not insult my intelligence? We are sitting around here as educated black people. We have put children and grandchildren through the school district. You know that we're not asking you for the specifics of a case and to look into someone's personnel file. You know that that's not what we're doing. We're asking you, what is the policy for this? Has an investigation begun? Has anyone talked to the parent of the child? Has a letter gone out? Do not say this to me again, that, we're limited in what we can say. But I realize that's a runaround. And I'm thinking, okay, we're sitting there with 4 degrees, 6 degrees between us, sitting in that room. Between the 3 black folks, and this is how you're talking to us. Mm-hmm. What would you do to a parent who's overwhelmed or not properly supported?
Yeah.
So this crap needs to be called out. I have a question for you all, and I have so many questions. So don't feel you don't have to elaborate. We can just kind of do the answers a little bit quickly because at any point, when the mother was not present, did you ask yourselves, or one to another person, just even internally, just ask or say, this would be different if this were a white kid? Kate, you're nodding your head. That occurred? Do you think was that ever voiced to the group of folks?
I don't know.
That are there.
I don't know.
But do you think others who are participating at that meeting?
I do.
Thought that.
Absolutely.
I mean, one of my first thoughts was, if this happened to, any of the friends' kids that we have, I feel like I would walk up right to the school that day and say, hey, we need information, picketing, I don't know, protest, just something.
Sure.
Just the lack of information that this mother had about what happened to her son was very disturbing.
I don't know that this was completely voiced in this group, but I think we've said it to each other and I think this is why so many parents got involved and were concerned, because they are seeing that difference now in how things are handled. If it was a black family or a white family, to be honest, I think there would be, like Kate's saying, a huge uproar that couldn't be ignored if it was a white parent. And I think that's so much of the frustration that we're seeing, and in some small way, how we can use our privilege. And I think this group, to their benefit, is seeing that in themselves, that we would have that privilege, and we're seeing that this black family is being treated differently, is talked to differently. And in many ways, I think the district feels like they can get away with treating the family this way and not giving all the information, because I think our kids would be treated completely different, and the families. Yeah.
So tell me about the emotions that were experienced, whether it's shock that this is happening or shock at that you're witnessing this. I mean, Kate and I both grew up in Madison. We have a reputation that we don't do this in Madison. We don't see color. We love everyone. We
we're so progressive.
We're so progressive. And so just talk to me about the emotions, not only at the outrage, that's one end of the spectrum, but fear, concern, helplessness, voicelessness towards your willingness or ability to respond to it individually as a group. So talk to me about the gamut of emotions, you three, about what does that feel like when you see something that perhaps your colleagues of color, black folks, have said, this wouldn't happen to a white kid. A lot of times you're just blown off. There you go, playing the race card. But you all are thinking among yourselves, without black people in the room saying, why this is happening. You all came to that conclusion. Tell me about what that feels like and what position that put you in by witnessing something that you clearly don't believe would happen to one of your children.
I mean, my reaction to it was when I heard various stories and heard from the mom and sort of heard from the school about it, I was like, I want to make sure I have a good sense of what happened. A clear sense, so I can, before I make judgment about it. But even from the beginning, it just I was looking for something to redeem the school's response, and I just never found it. And in some sense, my reaction was the degree of myself that I identified with the school. My kids have gone there. I like that I volunteer there. I run a club there, a bunch of other stuff. I was like, this is how you're doing? This is terrible. Why? This is not how I would do it if I were in the position. I don't think this is actually supported by the vast majority of parents that go to this school. Who are you protecting and who are you serving at some point? If the principal is running these public statements by folks at the district that have nothing to do with their school, and our principal is putting out this narrative that's against this mother, no one is served except the institution. And what is the purpose of the institution if it's all doing is taking care of itself? I mean, I just got real grumpy real fast and just tried to focus, and and talking with the mom and seeing what was going on, it seemed really clear that the school's general approach, not all, but general, was that they had a well-heeled plan to ignore the substance of what happened, and certainly never connect to the fact that there may be a larger issue of race going on somewhere.
Right. So then what does that feel like?
It feels hopeless.
Tell me more about that.
Well, I'll tell you, a couple of things have really struck me on this. And one is hearing the mom say she didn't think she'd be heard. Well, let me back up a little bit. So we had a meeting at our house, and, I'm sure she assumed, or I don't know, but that it would be mostly white people and then her. And so the bravery of her just to put herself in that new position, I was impressed by it. That would, that'd be hard. But then she came, and one thing that she said was, I don't think I'll be heard unless there are other white people in the room with me, when she meets with the principal and the superintendent. And that's not surprising. Well,
I mean, that's just par for the course. No,
but
please tell me
sad.
more about that. But I'm just saying that's so commonplace.
Sure. Right. And that's what I'm realizing. The other thing that really struck me is, I like the teacher that did this. And I think teachers are, I'm a teacher and we are human and make mistakes. Sure. And I don't know everything that happened in that situation. But what I know is that a little boy was traumatized.
Right.
And that is not being addressed in any way. And I'm worried about the greater impacts of that and how it's impacting his siblings and his friends and his education. To be traumatized. I mean, what are his, you talk about the discrepancy between the test scores in Wisconsin, and do those account for the trauma?
See, that's where I'm trying to go. Did anyone to begin to think, is this what's happening to kids in school? Wow. I appreciate the honesty of the mom and what she stated, but let's just process that a little bit. She's a taxpayer. She has a child or children in that school. Were you surprised that she felt that she'd have no voice? Well, let me back up. Let me ask it this way, Kate. Would you be concerned about numbers if this were your child? Or do you feel like, no, I'd be pissed enough that maybe for round one, I'd go up there alone or maybe with my husband. You may have thought that numbers are helpful. She wasn't talking about numbers because she wasn't talking about the NAACP and the Urban League and the churches. She said white people. So tell me about that discrepancy, that disparity, that she feels that, one, she has to get white people to believe this story. Well, what did he do? What did he say? Because that's often what's asked. That's also what's costly about coming. Just because people were white and parents and in that room didn't mean that they weren't going to ask, well, what did he do? Because I know this teacher, they wouldn't just put their hands on a child. And that's all the things that and even if the child did provoke, children are children, teachers are adults and they're trained. But I'm just curious about, what did you feel about that comment she made, and how foreign of a concept was that for you? And as a teacher, do you ever perceive the fact that that's what your Black parents are thinking if they have a concern about their child?
I don't think I'd thought it through in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And so to hear her say that did feel like a big shift from how I would feel. Mm-hmm. I would not be concerned about gathering numbers. If I had to go to this school to talk about an issue, I would go and I wouldn't be concerned. And I would also, which I think is maybe also different from her situation, I also feel like I would be able to get a community together pretty quickly and advocates pretty quickly if I wasn't getting the right answers. And it just seemed like she didn't have a community to help her get those answers. It's a completely different experience.
And I can
what
tell
the
you,
Black families are going through than what the white families.
Sure, I can tell you that that's such a common feeling. So if parents are so easily disenfranchised or marginalized, how do they convey confidence to their children that you can be safe, that what you say will be true, and that it matters? I had a standing rule with my mom. She had a standing rule with me to tell her the truth, and there are times where I had a propensity to falsify the evidence. She would say, if you just tell me the truth, you're not going to be in trouble. But if I catch you in a lie, because I can't protect you if you're lying. But what that meant was, if I said a teacher put their hands on me, if I said a police officer, a pastor, no matter what I said, it would be completely on, because she would look me in my eyes and say, "This, are you telling me that this is what happened?" And then she would just she just lace up and say, "Okay, we're gonna go here and take care of this." And so, but there's this sense of confidence that we're not going to let him waver. If this is what he said, this happened. So to have the school basically dismantle his story and to minimize his pain and trauma, how does he then say, well, I'm going to be seen as a person. I'm going to be seen as a student. I'm going to be seen as a learner, because you just ignored something that really does skew my sense of safety, my sense of belonging, and my sense of a protection. Some of the trauma that happens with Black students it's not always at the school. It's in stores, it's in supermarkets, it's in restaurants, it's on the playground, it's in other places, but they still bring that trauma to school. But when it happens in school, we've just seen kids just unravel. And so I appreciate the fact that the family that the parents came around this parent, because it's obvious she did not come to you all and say, can you come with me? You all reached out to me. So talk to me a little bit about where you think the group is and the support, and if there are any places where you're stuck, because what I'm hoping we can do for the next few minutes, if I can offer some kind of insight or coaching or support, just to make sure that the goodwill, the conscientiousness, and the commitment and the compassion of this group does not wane because of perceived procedural crap. You know, Jeremy, you and I were talking about this a little bit as we were putting this episode together, and I asked, you know, is there anything about this that frightens you? And you said, no. I think it's similar to Kate's sentiment. If something's wrong with this for my child, I'd go do this. And I remember asking you, well, is there any fear of repercussion, of retaliation on the part of the parents, the white parents? You said, no. You brought it up again today, sort of, you know, asking why I was asking that question. I said, because as a black parent, that's sort of the question. My daughter was a National Honor Society student. She just got a full ride to grad school. She's a future children's librarian. But her guidance counselor told her that it was too late to get into the National Honor Society. I Googled it. It was a month prior to the deadline. She also told her she would not get into Wisconsin, so don't apply. But when she wanted to apply to a smaller state school, she looked at her grades and said, oh, why aren't you in the gifted and talented program? Then they started bringing my daughter getting her out of class, both the guidance counselor and the principal, giving her applications to like Wash U down in St. Louis and stuff, because they hadn't looked at her grades. They just assumed because she was black, female, and athlete that she wasn't in the National Honor Society taking AP classes. What's interesting is when I contacted the principal, he gave her a new counselor. And I knew the principal. He and my mom had gone to grad school together. Our families have been friends for years. To me, that said, let's protect her from retaliation. You know, she's going to be retiring soon, and gave her the director of guidance as her counselor. She applied to Wisconsin, got in, got a scholarship, is now in her first year of grad school. But the principal moved her because there was a pattern of what was going on. And I feel like they didn't want to risk my daughter being, you know, subjected to more kind of anger or frustration. Oh, so your dad knows the principal, your mom knows the principal, so you can go over our head and blah, 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 blah. But for you all wanting to advocate for this family, even for your own child, never worry about retaliation? Or
I did not think about it until you mentioned it. I did not. It was not part of any calculation that I had ever made until you asked me about it.
In fact, Lexi asked me to not come to the school because when she told me what happened, I said, wait, they told you wouldn't get in? Honey, I'm a former UW-Madison recruiter. Like, your grandmother's a graduate of this school. Your mom and dad met in college and are graduates. Your aunt, your cousins. We have like 11, 12 degrees from Wisconsin. Honey, just under the whole idea of legacy. And it doesn't hurt that you got a 3.8 from Madison West High School. She said, no, Dad, don't come up. Because in her mind, she was trying to mitigate any fallout, because if you come up here, you can do stuff to me. But if you mess with my child and somehow demean her so that it hinders her thought, her perception of herself as being intelligent and all this kind of stuff, which she is, she kept me out of the school. And because she said, I'll handle it, because she probably feared the repercussion.
Yeah. And like the thing that followed right after me thinking about that was like thinking about like what I would do if like they did take retaliation against my son. And that was a moment where I felt like I could really identify with some stuff you had talked about, because that's like a hell no.
Right.
It's like
oh, I wish they would. I wish they would.
My wife's a doctor. I don't have a job. I will devote like 120 hours of my week to bringing you down. Right. Like, just pick that fight.
I will say, though, that I've talked to some other parents, and maybe they've expressed frustration and maybe some anger, not necessarily about retaliation in the school, but they've brought these issues up maybe in parent groups and different things like this, and they've essentially been sort of ignored or silenced, mm-hmm. or ostracized in some way from being in sort of those groups. And so I think there is some sense of that, of maybe people who have, maybe their kids have experienced this, or people mm-hmm. they know, and they've brought this up in the past and felt like, I can't keep doing this because I don't have any support in the community. So it is encouraging what's happening now, but I think there's that aspect that could happen mm-hmm. In some cases. And it's also sad that maybe something this big, a black child getting hands put on them, it takes that for people to be able to step forward and other people to listen. I mean, that's often what happens, I think, for people to listen, but I think there is that case too.
So tell me about the mindset of white allyship. So you see this, you know, Kate, you're an educator, your husband is, you're seeing these kinds of things. How far does the parent group push this? Because in the Black community, there are several schools of thought. That if white parents get involved, like, good, we have backup. There are people who are around me. Then there's a thought that people will start and then stop because maybe they're fearful of repercussion, or maybe they're friends. You know, there's all kinds of assumptions. Maybe they're friends with each other, and their kids are personal friends, and they don't want to mess that relationship up. And so I can imagine folks who are parents, white parents, in this support group, wanting to voice things, but maybe not knowing, well, how much do we voice and what does voicing look like? But then also the concern of Black parents that, is anyone else going to stay with me? Like, if I get a lawyer, if I go up in there and say, oh, hell no, you know, someone's going to still stay with me. Because even as an adult, when I become angry at injustice, I'm often coached by my white friends. I'm not a highly volatile person unless you mess with my mother, my wife, or my daughter. But I'm often coached about, don't sound too angry. Like, even when we started the Justified Anger movement, for 4 years, white funders and individuals have asked me, when are you going to change that from justified anger to justified action, or justify something else that has an A in it? But, like, how long are you going to be angry? And so we often find that we being Black people are talked off the ledge, because the perception is we'll be too loud, or we'll be rolling our necks, or snapping our fingers, or whatever. Like, go get the principal, go get this, call him, go get the president. And so I know that some of that is cultural and stylistic, but we also feel that sometimes our white colleagues will feel things very deeply, intellectually grasp them, but we don't know what it takes to get them to either the oh hell no, the freaking A stage. Like, what does it take to bring them around across the line and say, okay, we're going to go public or something? Because I remember, Jeremy, you talked about that people said, well, it seems like if we become too angry and frustrated, we'll be tuned out. And I asked, well, is that what you think Black people do? Like, is that the perception? And it could be that, well, they're loud and they're upset because it's compounded and nothing happens. Maybe it's the velocity of their voice, or maybe that it's just a Black child and nobody gives a damn. And they're just thinking the Black people are just going to get frustrated and go talk in their own corners about it, go to church and pray about it, but they're not going to organize enough to come and shut stuff down. And the white people who know the systemic realities and who could shut shit down if they wanted to might find that too messy and will go so far, but maybe question the power or the efficacy of their unity, the strength of their collective voices, or the ability to go to the media and say things like, am I trying to be the super white ally? Am I stepping up when the parent doesn't need that?
Hey everybody, we hope you've been enjoying this episode so far. My name is Tyler Nyland. I am the podcast manager for Black Like Me, and I wanted to let you know about an opportunity that you have if you've been looking to really gain better access and hear more about what we're doing with Black Like Me. We have an opportunity called Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/blacklikeme, you can find our page where we offer a lot of different opportunities for you to get involved or to join us in this work. So if you go on there, you'll see a bunch of different tiers that you can join, where you can become financial supporters. And with each different tier, you get an opportunity to receive different benefits from us, such as you might be a part of one where you get your name shouted on a podcast, you get a specific thank you. You might be able to join an exclusive Facebook group where you're able to process through different issues together. And then for a certain level, you even could get Dr. G to come out and fly out to you to have a meal. If you're a business, he might be able to do a whole day of consulting for you. So if you would go to patreon.com/blacklikeme, you can check out all the different tiers and options that we are able to give you. And you can really just support the mission of what we do here at Black Like Me. So we want to thank you for being a listener. That's awesome. Please go to patreon.com/blacklikeme. If you have any other questions, go to alexg.com/contact, fill out the form for a Black Like Me insurance. Now back to the episode.
Talk to me about some of the consternation that well-intentioned white folks, because we can talk about the races all day, but let's talk about the well-intentioned white folks who get stuck in the rules of engagement because no one taught you it. Talk to me a little bit about that. Kate, I'd love to really hear go ahead, Eli. I want to really hear Kate's perspective as an educator and a parent of a child in school.
Well,
But
I'll be really quick. I mean, on a personal note, I think me struggling with I didn't know the family or the mother before this. And I know, actually, Jeremy and I were sitting down with her to meet with a reporter. And afterwards, we were chatting about it. And we said, like, what's next steps? And, I was feeling like all business, like, if this doesn't work, like, if we get the word out and then we're going to go to these people and do this. I think the mother sort of took a moment and just kind of, there's kind of a lull in the conversation, kind of breathe. And honestly, I'm introverted, quiet, kind of a little bit awkward socially sometimes. And so I was just like realized about myself, like, oh, I should just get to know this mother better as a person. And I'm just like being driven by like, what are we going to do? What's the thing? And seeing it like a mission. And so I had to sort of look at that in myself and say, hey, it can be both. I can still keep that passion, but I do need to care about people as a person, and remind myself of that. And I think that can be something that well-intentioned white people do, is sort of just see it as this mission we're driving forward. And then maybe you do hit those roadblocks and you back off because you were just focused as it on like an agenda we're trying to accomplish. I think one thing, quick advice that you did give us recently off air was that groups can do two things at once. They can do many things at once and different tactics, and you don't have to feel like you're all in on all of those. And you gave the example of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr., who had very different approaches, but essentially they were after the same thing and cooperated in many ways. So I don't have to be the person yelling in front of a building or something. Maybe there's time for that, but I can write letters and speak my voice that way. And so I think that was encouraging, because that would be a frustration for me, is if like a group like this was all in on like, we're going to do all protests or something. This is just an example.
Sure.
And I'd be like, I don't know if that's the best tactic. And then I might just feel like I'm out of this group. So I think that was an encouragement to me to keep driving forward.
Sure.
I think for me, I don't know where this is going to end. I don't have a goal. Mostly I just want the family to feel heard.
Okay.
So and I'm going to keep trying to do what I can to make that happen.
Sure.
I mean, I know a lot of the times on the podcast you talk about how exhausting this work is.
Yes.
And so I'm trying right now just to, ask the mom what would help her, and then to do that work with her, for her. And so trying to alleviate some of that exhaustion is what I'm trying to mostly do. But it is hard. And I don't know, like right now we're trying to write a couple different letters to a couple of different groups. I think, I'm interested to see what the new superintendent will do. But mostly I'm interested to hear about these smaller groups of white people. I know that there are different parent groups at different schools who are starting to have more conversations. And there are a lot of teachers that I know about. There's an anti-racist teacher group that has started in the school district that meets monthly to look at for instance, the meeting this month is about de-centering whiteness in their curriculum. Or a couple months ago, it was how to respond to racist comments that your colleagues make in the coffee lounge. And so there are different things that people are doing that I'm inspired by, but I don't know. I'm just going to try to take it one step at a time and try to do the groundwork that can be so exhausting.
Do you think that group or groups like that, the anti-racism or anti-racist teachers group, do they build room into their agenda to maybe look at a situation like this, to maybe devise a plan or reaction?
To figure out what the teachers can do?
To put...
I think they would absolutely be open to it.
That's a suggestion, that I would make, because here's a question that we often ask. And what I love about this podcast is, and this is what my friends tell me, particularly my black friends, like, I really appreciate the honest conversations you have with white allies and white friends. And again, not saying that this is ultimately your responsibility. So please understand that I want to laud you for caring and being concerned. There's a thought in the black community that white people will not call white people out. That we will work with the black families. We'll coddle them. We'll support them. But that principal, that teacher needs to be called out. They need to be named. Somebody needs to reach out to the NAACP, to the Black Ministers Alliance. Even if that group doesn't want to say, oh, hell no, they need to have the people who say, oh, hell no, in their Rolodex. And so I just want to put that out there for consideration. You don't have to make excuses about it or overly affirm it. But what I really want to say is allyship is putting pressure on someone who's been wounded by a puncture or something, but it's also saying I saw the shooter go that way, or I saw the person who punched him go that way. We've got to get at the system, because it's not just that one child or that one teacher, that one principal. There's a toxicity inside the school district and school districts that this continues to happen. And so if the focus is only on the parent, that child, that teacher, and that principal, it doesn't put broader pressure. And so my suggestion, as a person out here really trying to bring the various groups together, that let's find a mechanism for testing the toothiness of these groups, because it's very easy in Madison among intellectuals to understand, to study, to talk, to decentralize. Curriculum that is void of white supremacy for the comfort of black students is not going to stop him from having hands put on him. So we need to do that, and I laud that, and I'm not belittling that at all. But because my work tends to be the capacity building part in African American people, but speaking truth to power and challenging the systemic reality, is that group of capable professional individuals spinning their wheels a little bit on things that some common sense might say to them, like, how you do a better job of this. But if the kids who are benefiting from that curriculum are feeling unsafe in that school, what have we really done for those kids? And it makes me ask the question, who buys the silence of everyone? Because if you all don't keep asking the parent, and she's not connected to her pastor or the NAACP, chances are she's not going to run in and really push that agenda. Very few people go in and do. It takes a special fortitude to do that, because it's exhausting, because the parent is trying to wrestle with that same kind of reality at home. I've got friends who are MDs, and they walk into the university hospital and someone says, I want to see a doctor, not a nurse. And this is a person who turned down Harvard Medical School to go to school here to be close to family. She is an MD and has a degree in public health, and she's still thought of as someone who's going to change the bedpan. And so what energy does she have to come home and to tell her children, oh, hell no, they're not going to talk to you like that. You got an MD and they talk to you like that until they look at the jacket, and then still fight the assumptions. Well, were you an affirmative action admit? Like, okay, you're black and a doctor, but where did you kind of fall? We're just assuming that if a white man comes in with a coat on, a white coat, he's educated on top of his class. The assumption is she is a CNA or an affirmative action placement. And so I see the opportunity in Madison for allies to realize you can't do everything, but when something is as blatant and is burning so much inside people's chest, does some of the energy in supporting the mom need to be diverted towards saying, we want to talk to you, principal. We want to talk to you. Mom's not in the room. We're parents. We want to tell you what we heard, what we didn't get. So let me just ask this. Has the group met with the principal?
My husband and I have a meeting tomorrow.
Okay, but just the two of you, but not the group.
Right.
Got you.
Definitely others have. I can't say that I have.
Now, that's where I think the strength of group coming in, because what happens is people try to divide and conquer and appease folks. So I'm glad you're doing that. But just thinking with a community organizing hat on, if folks were to come in and say, this is Jeremy and he represents this group, and this is Kate and she represents this group, and this is Alex, and then this is Eli, and we're going to go back to our constituents, our neighborhoods, our churches, and give some feedback. Here are 3 things that we sent you in an email. They have not been addressed, and we want to really settle it here, but we will go to the media. We will go to the Black Ministers Alliance. We will go to the NAACP. But to date, these are 3 things that you have not done. As a teacher, we were trained not to do this, and you are now doing what you pay me not to do. So I'm just saying, I'm curious. I think we need both in. I think we need people going in, but I think there's some real strength with a group of white people going in saying, and we believe that if this were one of our children, this would not be going on. So you need to tell us why we're wrong. So that's just some stuff to really think about, because there's strength in numbers. And so in our community, Black community, we're never sure. And that's why these dialogues are really important. Is it a matter of just not wanting to get messy, not getting our hands that dirty, not exerting that level of pressure because that feels uncomfortable and is not the way we were necessarily reared to confront issues? I wonder what things really prohibit true allyship, because this is a great opportunity to exert some muscle.
You're making me think, and you're making me wonder why we haven't done that. And the first answer that comes to my head is that I don't want to step on the family's toes. I don't want to kind of override the family's interests with what I think the problem is, or center myself in that way.
And I think that's really important. No, keep going. I'm sorry.
Not that I think that I think the family would support exactly what you're suggesting.
I think they would too.
But that's tricky, right? That's a tricky balance.
It is.
But that's making me realize, as I realize that tricky balance, that does kind of get back to inaction.
Oh,
I mean, we're still doing a lot, but I hear, but what's stopping us is
well-intentioned inaction, and that's why I want to try to identify. I don't want to spend time on my podcast talking about knuckleheads who don't want to do anything. I feel that if I work with the folks who have the heart and the compassion, they have the honesty to perceive a situation and say that wouldn't happen to my child. I find that many times they're stuck with just things like this. And here's something you could say that doesn't even require a nod or an approval from the mom. You could say, and I'm just thinking out loud. So,
sure.
I don't know that I want my child in a school where the perception is things can happen to black children that wouldn't happen to them. It makes me wonder, and this is how I would just talk as a black person.
Sure.
It makes me wonder, what did those gentlemen in Charlottesville see as children in terms of the treatment of black folks that makes them think that they can come at people, wear these tiki torches, carry them, talk about blood and soil and America's been taken? Where does that begin? Your concern. Okay, principal, let's not talk about the parent or the teacher, because I'm not here to do this, or the parent. Let's talk to you about my child that's in this classroom. I'll be damned if I'm going to raise a child watching this happen class after class, year after, because I don't want things formulated in my child's mind that there's a difference of worth, there's a difference of value. So you need to talk to me as a white parent about the trauma that happens to white children, because one of these children might grow up thinking it's okay to repeat this action. That way it's totally on you, and you have to begin to understand, if your child is friends with this child, it's going to have an impact. They might decide I'm not going to hang out with white kids anymore. I remember when Roots came out. We went to Lincoln when it was a middle school.
Okay.
Roots came out in 1977. I was in 8th grade. That place was very diverse. Economically, we had Southeast Asian children from Bayview, Bram Hill. Madison's sort of a small community, but we had kids from Winona Way who were very wealthy living on the lake, and then kids in South Madison. When Roots came out, black kids were just thinking, we didn't know that happened to us. We didn't know people chopped off black people's feet. We knew that there was a ship and there was slavery, but is that just like work? They still had family and homes. When we began to see that, we saw white people differently. I remember it. Folks who were friends, folks who were dating. It just threw this mix in it. And we don't ask ourselves, well, at what age do kids start sitting at different tables? At what age do these things happen? And do white children have a voice? And so that's sort of a long response, but I just think when white parents observe injustice, you are within your rights to say, how does this impact the white children in the room and how they think about what they can do and get away with it?
I think that was eye-opening in the meeting a bunch of parents had with the superintendent and other administration, and that was brought up. One parent specifically said, I am also concerned about my kids with this teacher. And it was eye-opening what a surprise that was to the administration.
Because they were wondering, why do you care?
Why would you care? And it took multiple parents speaking up and say, yes, we need that addressed to us as well. Other kids saw this, and since then there's been another incident which has no communication about the actual incident or the kids involved. And there's definitely kids from all different backgrounds who witness this, and exactly what you're saying. What kind of effect does that physical violence, I will say, in this case, have on all the kids that see it? Right?
Eli, I can tell you as a parent, let me put another hat. I can tell you as a pastor, the people who I have counseled who are struggling with anger and violence because they witnessed it in their homes or in places, it's undeniable that there is a connection. I would just say parents need to be concerned. Adults mishandling kids, putting their hands on kids, using objects to hit kids. If we don't think that that's having a psychological impact on the folks, on the kids, and all of these other things, not only the microaggressions of black kids wondering, is it going to happen to me? Is someone going to pull my hair out, my braids out? Is someone going to call me this name? But white students, this is injuring everyone. Again, and this is why we're paying too much money to have these people not communicate with us.
I think one more thing is absolutely everything that you're saying about these incidents. But even my husband and I talk about on a daily life moment, what our son is seeing in his classroom. And we've had great teachers. But it's part of the system where when he does advanced learning classes, we ask him who's in those classes, and it's all white kids. And then we ask him, who's getting in trouble? Who's having a hard time today? And it's the black kids. And so it's this system that he's seeing every day, and not just these incidents that I hope are rare, but I know are not that rare that you're talking about. But it's the daily stuff that he's seeing that I'm worried about.
I mean, if you're not asking him about it, and again, you and your husband are educators, what about folks who are just really busy?
Sure.
White parents are really busy. White parents work 2 jobs too to get their kids. So what happens when the kid comes home and doesn't process that with anyone? Well, just because a kid is brown or black, honey, doesn't mean that they have to be in this particular class. Sometimes there are anger issues. And, I had friends who were white who used to get in trouble. But if no one helps to disaggregate that information and those experiences, kids are building reality all the time about who's safe and what's good and what's healthy and who gets away with what. I mean, we are subtly training our kids to be more divided than we even are as a nation right now. By these that's the danger of being in a place like Madison that has such blaring disparities, is that when you have 70% of the kids, and I don't know if that statistic is right, but it's close, being on free and reduced lunch, it's very easy for teachers to assume, well, 3/4 of the kids I see are impoverished, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That probably played into the fact that the counselor sat down and heard my daughter say, well, I want to go to Wisconsin. I'm sure Lexi didn't say, my mom, my dad, my aunt, my cousin, my grandma went here. I'm sure she didn't say all of that. She just said, I want to go to Wisconsin. Well, that's what every kid says when your school is a half mile from the campus. But the perception was not even looking at her grades. And so my concern is, because we're not talking about these incidents and we're not informing parents, we're allowing another generation to determine reality by what we're not saying. And to me, that means another generation of black kids have got to deal with white kids who have envisioned that, because the white students in our school district will be future doctors and dentists and lawyers and teachers and parents and voters and politicians. So that just, it's really frightening. So I just want to encourage the group to really think about what some of the next steps are, but even challenging other groups that exist, that if they don't push power or address the systemic reality that is really just band-aiding the issue, not bashing them for what they're doing, but we have an opportunity. I think that's a responsibility of power. I mean, I'm out here on these lines, not just because it's my responsibility as a black person, but in my culture, we're trained, if you make it through, you get an education, it is incumbent upon you to reach back. You must use your voice, your access, your resources, your passport. You must become a global spokesperson on issues of injustice. That's what you do. You can't just get out of here and not assume you haven't stood on other people's shoulders. You must open the door for others. So I wear the pressure of that each day. And what I really want to do for folks who are would-be allies is to share some of that burden, to be as angry as I am. And many people have not just thought that way because they've not had to. If you've never had to take a group of people to change a principal's mind about your child, I could see why it wouldn't occur to people to say, well, let's do this, to put the pressure on it, about going public about the mistreatment of this white person. I'll tell you, an incident happened. You remember the incident about the noose on campus. I just said, this is kind of like the mom. I said, when this happens, they already expect the Urban League, NAACP, the black pastors to do stuff. They already have a room reserved down at the Urban League building. Let's come to the south side. Let's order some food. And let's just say, we're sorry. I said, screw that. I wrote my friends, my white allies, and said, if you have a degree from Wisconsin, this is what I need you to do. I need you to write from your perspective. I didn't tell them what to say. But you know what? Within a day, I got a call. Say, hey, the chancellor, hey, Alex, this is the chancellor. Sounds like you want to have lunch with me.
Within a day.
Within a day. And so somehow she got my cell number. I don't have hers. And I mean, we have a decent rapport. I love UW-Madison, but you just can't sweep stuff under the rug. But I thought, let me show the anger of white people, because people aren't used to that. They're not accustomed to that. And so I think there's real strength in the black community. There's real strength when a white person thinks, you're going to call me out. Y'all are going to call me out about something that's happened to a black person. Because if I say to the principal, this is racist or this is insensitive, you wouldn't do this to a white kid. Well, Dr. G, when white people sit around saying, you know good and well, we don't do this to our own children, it's a whole different thing. Because a white person calling a white person out is somewhat different. Because you say it to me, I mean, I say it, you know, you kind of do like Trump. You start telling your black friends to step up, stand up, and you count them. That's just a different level of accountability. It's using the strength of the privilege, but the heart of the ally. And the convergence of those is something that's very important, because the microaggressions that this parent and students feel, we know this, Eli and I are in this work, it is now social determinant of health. It has now been determined by schools of health and public policy. The city of Madison has adopted this as a reality. We being black people contract diseases earlier than our white counterparts, the same diseases. And even with treatment, we die prematurely. So this is a matter of life or death. And so if our allies don't keep that in mind, they could waste energy thinking this is really helpful. And who wants to look back in 30 years and think I was that close to pushing the envelope? And no one told me it was okay. No one told me that this would be powerful. And no one supported me as a white person when I went up against that buzzsaw. That's when we got to build a rapport, because I'm thinking these groups that are gathering, I'd love to come in with some black parents and some black educators and some black leaders and say, okay, let's strategize, let's work together. Because I think that group connecting with the principals and saying, here's what we want, here's our list of demands. You will send a letter out. You will apologize. You will recant what you said, indicating this parent's lying. And we've got the media on speed dial, and we're already in touch with Justified Anger. We're already in touch with the Black Ministers Alliance, the NAACP, because we can't continue having this on our watch. And I wouldn't wait until the new superintendent.
That was a quick question I had.
Sure.
And I think maybe you just answered it. But how important is it, do you think, like in this example, almost all white parents, families that are trying to do something, how important is it to bring in the African-American voice into that? Because I know you also talk about the concern of, you know, putting this on the African-American community to solve it and say, hey, what should we do? What's the solution? You know, and it's like, well, that's not my job. You know, this is a lot about your privilege that made this system happen. But I do think, you know, in some of these meetings, it benefits to have that perspective even, because I don't see everything going on. For example, a principal talked about having empathy interviews with the African-American families. And it didn't feel right at the time, but I had to think about it more. And I said, if I was black in that meeting, that would not feel good. That language, like, I feel like a project that you're just trying to, you know, talk to me to pacify, you know,
sure,
that group of people. Like, it already separates it. So those things, I think somebody who's had more experience with that from the African-American community would call that out in the moment. And just in general, trying to strategize and things, I think that is needed. But I mean, do you have any advice on?
Sure, that's a great question,
navigate that?
Eli. A couple of things is, I think that it's important for principals or leaders who are experiencing a group coming in exhibiting that kind of solidarity to see unity among the group. So I would say that building bridges with the black community has to it needs to happen before that kind of meeting, so that it's not just someone who's cosmetically placed there. So what that means is it might be myself or someone from my staff coming to your group or that parents group and just talking and getting up to speed, connecting, thinking about a process, and then saying, okay, I've got some colleagues who can also come. But I think that relationship has to stay. I don't think groups should be apologetic if the parents who are connected are all white, because that's still a power base. But I think you bring your black colleagues in to ask, okay, now what's going on that black parents aren't here? We have to have that honest talk. But how do we also staff you when you want to go into a meeting? Because I think there's something very powerful to say, oh, we do have black parents and we are connected with, and you name the black groups, but we want you to hear our voice. We don't want you to take us seriously because we got black people here. We're taxpayers. We're parents. You're going to listen to us because you always do. But what you don't do is listen to us talk about what you're doing to black kids, and it's going to stop. That's a real powerful thing to say, and then it frees a black person up in those meetings. I mean, you have to decide what the meeting is. The initial meeting, you might want to just go in with guns blazing like that. But then at some other point, when you get into the more strategic part of it, like even when there's black folks, we bring other black people. Like there were 3 of us with the meeting with the superintendent yesterday or 2 days ago. Another time we had a broader group. But I think the piece I want to say is let's work on building relationships between that group and black influencers so that it's not awkward when there's a situation. This is what's going on. We're going to do this piece. Can you do that piece? We're going to say this. We're writing a letter. Can you just make sure it doesn't sound paternalistic or whatever. But we build that rapport in our community. It's easy to forget that folks who want to partner on that level are present. And so there are folks who would welcome that kind of partnership. And we have people in our network who could help to write letters and to put pressure on systems where that happens so that this group can devise what's taking place and we can resource that parental group. But I'm just saying, if you're going in to advocate for black kids, it's important for the black community to help resource you so that you feel as empowered as you need. And if that helps the group to feel even more empowered by just knowing we've got your back, then we need to make that happen. That's an easy step. I think that question hasn't been asked because maybe we haven't gotten as close to the issue. But this group could do something that changes the course of things that can become spoken of in broader groups and circles that could cause systemic change in other schools. I'm looking at the fact that we're out of time, and I know other people are coming into the studio. Kate, I'm gonna give you the last word. I'm gonna give each of you just like 10 seconds just to wrap up. Jeremy, anything you want to say? Eli, Kate, anything that you just either thought or an aha, just something anything that you just like to voice? Your presence here has been so powerful.
I'm fired up.
That's good. I just want to state this until they kick me out of the studio. And you may already know this, Kate, but I'm just going to restate it. Black people were having coffee thrown on them at lunch counters for years. But in North Carolina, white women from like all white schools came and sat at the counters with them. Coffee was thrown on them too, but the cameras came on because people were shocked that they would get the same treatment. America watched and lauded the white women for sitting there and for coming with them, but the news caught it because just throwing it on black people was not newsworthy. Throwing it on white women. After a few days, white men came because the white women were there. Within 9 months, the laws around or the rules around desegregating lunch counters changed in 54 cities over 9 months. But white women were key. They showed solidarity. We're not taught that in history. We're taught that we've always been at odds. The women's suffrage movement really grew out of abolitionist movement because they saw the benefits of organizing. But white women had a role in kicking off the popularity of the civil rights movement. And so if we don't know that history, we question ourselves as to whether or not we should be in this space. Should we say something? Historically, you have been. So don't feel like this is a strange space. Be able to be emboldened to go into that space with a sense of rootedness. But it's not an imposition to be in that space. It's your right, and it's also your history. So thank you all for being here. I told you all that this is going to be a very insightful and powerful episode. To my African American listeners, it's good to remember that we have white colleagues who are allies or would be allies in the making, but we have to build the room to coach and to encourage folks to take that next step because this is new for a lot of people. And to our non-Black listeners, particularly our white listeners, I hope that you're learning a lot about things you can do, things that it's okay to do, conversations you can have, and the use of the powerfulness of your voice individually or collectively. I think in taking these things to heart, we view our situations and its ills differently. We can do more than tweet about the divisiveness of our country. We can actually create more unity, even if it's in one classroom, one school, one district. Let's not be afraid of the size of the issue. Let's just be convinced by the strength and the powerfulness of love, respect, and unity. And let's just turn this stuff around. So you go out and have a great day. And as we've always told you, listen, learn, share, go to the Patreon page and support us. Make sure that you subscribe to this and take a step that moves you and some system that you're part of in a better direction. All right. Have a great day. I want to thank Corey Saffold for creating the music for this podcast, my podcast manager, Tyler Nyland, engineer and editor, Eli Steenlage, my editor, Jeremy Holliday, and a special thank you to WORT Studios, where we record Black Like Me.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. You can find out more about Dr. Alex G's amazing work at www.alexg.com. Black Like Me is sponsored by the generosity of the Human Family Unity Foundation.